Lauren Johnson gripped the worn-out leather bags, staring at the massive wrought iron gates in front of her. They were taller than any she'd seen outside of a movie, black, sleek and guarded by gold-plated initials, W.H. William Harrington, Beverly Hills billionaire, real estate tycoon, and, according to the whispers at the Maid agency, husband to the most impossible woman alive. "Good luck, honey," the agency rep had told her that morning, slipping the address across the desk like it was a death sentence. No one lasts more than 2 weeks. One girl made it to 3, but that was only because the missus was on a trip to Monaco. Lauren had smiled politely. She needed this job. Not for the challenge, not for the prestige, and certainly not for the story she could tell. She needed it because her 7-year-old son Malik needed a new inhaler, rent was due in 9 days, and her fridge contained nothing but ketchup, mustard, and a questionable bag of lettuce. She pressed the call button on the gate intercom. "Name?" A woman's voice, clipped and bored. "Lauren Johnson. I'm here to start." The gates began to swing open before she could finish. No welcome, no instructions, just a slow creak that reminded her she was entering another world entirely. The driveway was a winding path of cobblestone, lined with manicured hedges and marble statues of Greek gods. The mansion emerged from behind a row of cypress trees like something out of a luxury magazine, white columns, endless windows, and a front door so wide it looked like it belonged to a hotel. A tall man in a black suit, mid-60s, silver hair, posture so straight he could balance a glass on his head, opened the door before she could knock. "Miss Johnson," he said, his British accent crisp. "I'm Arthur, the butler. Follow me." Inside, the air smelled faintly of lavender and money. Lauren's worn sneakers squeaked against gleaming marble floors. Arthur led her through a foyer the size of her entire apartment, past grand staircases, oil paintings, and chandeliers dripping with crystal. The silence was heavy, like the house itself was listening. They stopped in a sunlit room where a woman sat in a cream silk robe, sipping something from a crystal flute. She didn't look up immediately. When she did, Lauren's first thought was movie star. Vanessa Harrington was stunning, sharp cheekbones, glossy dark hair, eyes like polished steel. But the beauty was undercut by the way those eyes scanned Lauren up and down, not with curiosity, but with the precision of someone inspecting a flaw in a diamond. "So," Vanessa said finally, her voice smooth and cool. "You're the new one." Lauren stood straighter. "Yes, ma'am." Vanessa's lips curved, not into a smile but something more like amusement at a private joke. "We'll see how long you last." Lauren said nothing. Arthur cleared his throat. "Mrs. Harrington, I'll show Ms. Johnson to her quarters and begin orientation." "Do that," Vanessa replied, turning back to her drink. "Oh, and Ms. Johnson." She let the words hang in the air until Lauren met her gaze. "In this house, mistakes aren't forgiven. Not once. Not ever." The next hour was a blur of instructions. There were rooms Lauren wasn't allowed to enter unless summoned. The master suite, the study, the upstairs balcony. Breakfast trays had to be delivered at 8:05 sharp, not 8:04, not 8:06. Malik's name couldn't be mentioned in front of the Harringtons. Arthur suggested personal matters be kept invisible. By the time Arthur handed her the cleaning schedule, Lauren's head was spinning. Her first task: polish the silverware in the dining room before lunch. The dining room was a palace of dark oak and gold trim, with a table so long it needed its own zip code. She'd barely started on the first fork when a voice behind her made her jump. "You missed a spot." Vanessa stood in the doorway, robe now replaced with a fitted cream dress that looked like it cost more than Lauren's car. Lauren inspected the fork. "I don't see." Vanessa took it from her hand, holding it to the light. "Smudge. Right there. Do it again." She placed the fork back on the table and walked away without another word. Lauren exhaled slowly. One smudge. The rest of the morning was a minefield. A vase had to be shifted 2 inches to the left because it's always been there. A curtain had to be drawn exactly halfway. And when Lauren accidentally stepped into the wrong hallway, a maid she'd never met hissed, "Turn back. Now." By the end of her shift, her legs ached, her back throbbed, and her mind replayed Vanessa's words. Mistakes aren't forgiven. As she walked toward the staff quarters, Arthur appeared beside her. "They all quit," he said quietly as though reading her thoughts. "Every last one. But you might just be different." Lauren didn't answer, but in her chest, something stubborn flared to life. She was going to last, even if it killed her. By her third day in the Harrington mansion, Lauren understood that the worst rules weren't written anywhere. They were the ones no one told you about until you broke them. The first came at 7:30 that morning, when she entered the grand hallway carrying a basket of freshly laundered towels. The sunlight was streaming in through the tall windows, catching the sheen of the marble, and for a moment she forgot to watch her steps. "Stop." The voice was low, firm, Arthur's. He appeared from a side corridor, his gloved hand raised. "You're on the wrong side of the hallway." Lauren blinked. "The wrong side? The right side is for family and guests. Staff keep to the left. Always. If Mrs. Harrington or Mr. Harrington see you walking in their lane," he let the sentence trail off. "Well, you won't last long." She stepped over the invisible boundary, feeling suddenly foolish. "Got it?" Arthur gave a brief nod and continued on, leaving her with the heavy realization. In this house, even the floors had rules. The second rule came from Camila, one of the younger maids, who slipped into the laundry room while Lauren was folding sheets. Camila's brown eyes darted toward the hallway before she whispered, "Don't look Mrs. Harrington in the eye unless she speaks to you first." Lauren frowned. "What happens if you do?" Camila's voice dropped lower. "She'll say you're challenging her. Then she'll find something wrong with your work, no matter how perfect it is. And if she wants you gone?" She snapped her fingers. Lauren folded the sheet in silence. She'd worked for difficult clients before, but Vanessa Harrington was building an entirely new category in her mind, half aristocrat, half predator. The third rule Lauren discovered all by herself. Late that afternoon she was dusting the main library, a cavernous room with walnut shelves stretching up 2 stories, the air smelling faintly of leather and old money. She paused to admire a collection of antique globes near the window. "Those are not to be touched." Vanessa's voice came from behind her. Lauren turned, careful to keep her gaze low until she was addressed directly. "They're beautiful," she said, keeping her tone neutral. "They're priceless," Vanessa corrected. "And they've been in this family for 3 generations. One fingerprint and I'd have to send them out for restoration. That would be disappointing." Lauren felt the sting beneath the smooth words. "Yes, ma'am." Vanessa's eyes lingered on her for a moment too long. Then she left, her heels clicking against the polished floor like a metronome marking Lauren's discomfort. By evening, Lauren was exhausted, not from the physical work, but from the constant mental tightrope walk. Every word, every step, every glance had to be calculated. She carried Malik's picture in her pocket, touching it now and then when the weight of the mansion pressed too heavily on her. The little gap in his front teeth. His bright, mischievous smile. "You're why I'm here, baby," she thought. "I can take anything if it means you're okay." Dinner service that night was another test. The family dined in the smaller of the 2 dining rooms, smaller meaning it could seat only 12. Lauren served roasted duck and asparagus, keeping her eyes on the plates, not the faces. "More wine, Mr. Harrington?" she asked softly. He nodded without looking at her. William Harrington was a tall man with silver at his temples, the kind of presence that filled the room even when he said nothing. If Vanessa was fire, he was ice, still but capable of freezing anything in his path. Halfway through the meal, Vanessa's voice cut through the clink of silverware. "Lauren, you folded the napkins incorrectly." Lauren glanced at the crisp white triangles by each plate. They were perfect. Arthur had even approved them earlier. "I'll fix them right away, ma'am." She went around the table, refolding each napkin while 12 pairs of eyes followed her movements. When she reached Vanessa, the woman leaned close enough for only Lauren to hear. "Arthur might let things slide," she murmured, "but I notice everything." Lauren kept her face blank, but inside, something twisted. This wasn't just about chores, it was about control. After dinner, she returned to the staff quarters, her feet aching. Camila was there, sitting on the edge of her bed. "You survived another day," Camila said with a tired smile. "Most new ones quit by now." "I'm not most new ones," Lauren replied, setting down her apron. Camila tilted her head. "You think you can outlast her?" Lauren thought of Malik's smile again. She thought of the fridge with nothing in it. She thought of Vanessa's smirk when she'd found that invisible smudge on the fork. "I don't just think it," Lauren said quietly. "I know it." Somewhere down the hall, a grandfather clock chimed the hour, its sound echoing through the mansion like a warning. Lauren didn't flinch. She was learning the rules. And once she knew them all, she might just start bending them. By her fourth day, Lauren had memorized the invisible lanes in the hallway, the precise temperature Mrs. Harrington liked her tea, and the exact angle a curtain should hang to allow the right amount of morning light. But none of that prepared her for what happened in the kitchen. It was just past 9 a.m., and the house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Lauren had been told to prepare a light breakfast tray for Mrs. Harrington: fruit, yogurt, a warm croissant and chamomile tea with honey. Simple. Straightforward. She laid everything neatly on the silver tray, double-checking that the croissant faced the right way on the plate. Arthur had taught her that even the direction of the food mattered here. "Good morning, Miss Johnson." The voice was warm in tone but cold in intent. Vanessa was standing in the doorway, her cream silk robe catching the light. She was never in the kitchen at this hour, there were staff for that. Lauren straightened. "Good morning, ma'am. I was just preparing your—" "Oh, don't let me interrupt. I'll just watch." Vanessa crossed to the counter, her robe trailing slightly behind her. She leaned against the marble, eyes sharp, following every movement Lauren made. Lauren's hands kept working, arranging, pouring, slicing the banana just so. But she could feel the scrutiny, the way Vanessa's gaze searched for a mistake like a hawk searching for prey. When the tray was ready, Lauren reached for the teapot to pour the tea into the delicate porcelain cup. That's when Vanessa spoke. "Is the water hot enough?" "Yes, ma'am. I just boiled it." Vanessa's lips curved. "Mind if I check?" Before Lauren could answer, Vanessa took the pot, tilted it toward the cup, and in one fluid, deliberate motion, she poured half the tea onto the saucer and the pristine linen napkin beneath it. "Oh dear," Vanessa said, her voice a picture of feigned innocence. "You really must be more careful." Lauren stared at the spreading stain. She hadn't touched the pot. She hadn't spilled a drop. And yet, she knew exactly how this would look to anyone who walked in now. Arthur's words from the first day rang in her mind. "Mistakes aren't forgiven." Vanessa set the pot down lightly. "Perhaps you should redo the entire tray. After all, I can't have breakfast served sloppily." "Can I?" Lauren kept her voice even. "No, ma'am." Vanessa lingered a moment longer, watching as Lauren began again. When she finally left, her soft laughter followed her out of the room. It would have been easy to start over in silence, swallow the humiliation, and deliver the tray. But as Lauren replaced the napkin, a flicker of resolve lit in her chest. She wasn't going to let this woman think she could be toyed with. By the time she finished the second tray, Lauren had made one small change. Instead of serving the tea already poured, she placed the teapot, still steaming, beside the cup on the tray. The linen napkin was folded perfectly, the saucer spotless. She carried it to the sunroom, where Vanessa was lounging with a glossy magazine. "Your breakfast, ma'am?" Vanessa glanced at the tray, her smile tightening when she saw the untouched cup. "Why haven't you poured the tea?" Lauren met her gaze just long enough to make the point without breaking the no eye contact unless spoken to rule. "I thought you might prefer to pour it yourself. That way it will be exactly how you like it." The silence that followed was sharper than glass. Vanessa set her magazine aside, studying her like a puzzle she hadn't expected to be difficult. "I see." She picked up the pot, poured the tea and took a sip. Her eyes didn't leave Lauren's face. "You may go." Back in the kitchen, Arthur was waiting. He didn't ask what had happened, he didn't need to. "She'll keep testing you," he said quietly. "It's what she does. Most break by the end of the week." Lauren set the tray down and exhaled. "Then I'll just have to keep passing her tests." Arthur allowed the faintest of smiles. "Be careful. Passing her tests sometimes makes her invent harder ones." Lauren thought of Malik, of the inhaler tucked beside his bed, of the rent notice folded in her purse. "She can make them as hard as she wants," Lauren said. "I'm not going anywhere." That night, alone in her small staff room, Lauren lay awake long after the house went quiet. She realized that today hadn't just been about a spilled cup of tea. Vanessa had been sending a message. And so had she. Lauren had worked long shifts before, 12 hours on her feet in hospital wards, running from room to room, juggling patients and emergencies. But nothing in her life had prepared her for a Beverly Hills high society dinner. By late afternoon, the Harrington mansion was buzzing like a beehive. Florists delivered arrangements of white orchids. Catering staff rolled in silver chafing dishes and stacks of fine china. The air was thick with the scent of truffle oil and the faint, metallic tang of polished silver. Arthur pulled Lauren aside near the pantry. "You're assisting tonight. That means serving courses, refilling glasses, and being invisible unless spoken to." "Invisible," Lauren repeated. He gave her a pointed look. "Mrs. Harrington will be looking for an opportunity. Don't give her one." Lauren already knew what that meant. At 7 sharp, the guests began to arrive. Men in perfectly tailored tuxedos, women in gowns that shimmered under the chandelier light. Laughter and champagne flutes filled the air. The dining room, with its 12-seat mahogany table, looked like something out of a luxury magazine spread. Lauren stood at the edge of the room, holding a tray of champagne. As she offered glasses, she caught fragments of conversation. Mergers, overseas investments, vacation homes in Monaco. These people didn't just live in another tax bracket. They lived on another planet. Vanessa swept in, dazzling in a deep emerald gown. Her hair was pinned into an elegant twist, and her diamond necklace caught the light like 1,000 small suns. She moved from guest to guest, dispensing air kisses and compliments, but when her eyes landed on Lauren, the warmth vanished. "Make sure my guests are well taken care of," she said smoothly. "We wouldn't want any incidents." The way she said incidents made it sound like a threat. The first course went smoothly, seared scallops with a delicate drizzle of saffron cream. Lauren moved between guests with practiced efficiency, topping off water glasses and collecting empty plates. It was during the second course, wild mushroom risotto, that Vanessa struck. "Lauren," she said suddenly, her voice cutting through the low hum of conversation. "Would you be a dear and tell Mr. Covington where these mushrooms are from?" 12 heads turned toward her. Lauren froze for a fraction of a second. She hadn't prepared the dish, the catering staff had. She could see the trap. If she guessed wrong, she'd look incompetent. If she admitted she didn't know, Vanessa would make sure the guests thought she was untrained. Arthur, standing near the far end of the table, gave her the smallest of nods. Lauren smiled politely. "Of course, ma'am." She turned to the distinguished gentleman at Vanessa's left. "These are black trumpet mushrooms, flown in from a farm in Oregon that specializes in sustainable foraging. Chefs selected them for their rich, earthy flavor." It was a gamble. She knew black trumpets were prized in upscale cuisine, and Oregon was a common source. Mr. Covington's face lit up. "Ah, I thought I recognized the taste." "Excellent choice." Vanessa's smile tightened. "Yes, excellent." The rest of the evening, Vanessa kept finding small ways to put Lauren on the spot. "Lauren, refill Mrs. Ellison's wine." "Oh, careful, that's a vintage Bordeaux." "Lauren, perhaps you could clear Mr. Liang's plate, he's still eating?" "Oh, my mistake." "Lauren, you folded the napkin incorrectly, again." Each comment was made just loud enough for the guest to hear, wrapped in the polite tone of a hostess but sharpened with an edge meant to draw blood. Lauren kept her expression neutral, but inside, her determination hardened. She would not give Vanessa the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. When dessert arrived, petit fours arranged like tiny jewels on silver platters, Lauren served them with steady hands. She noticed Vanessa watching her like a hawk, waiting for a stumble. Instead, Lauren leaned slightly toward Mrs. Ellison and said, "These are lemon thyme and raspberry ganache, ma'am. Chef recommends starting with the lemon for a lighter finish." The older woman's eyes lit up. "Oh, how lovely. Thank you, dear." By the end of the evening, several guests were smiling at Lauren, thanking her by name. When the last guest departed and the door closed, the silence in the foyer was almost deafening. Vanessa stepped closer, her heels clicking against the marble. "You did well tonight." The compliment was unexpected, but then Vanessa's voice dropped, silk turning to steel. "Don't mistake that for approval. I'm still waiting for the moment you fail." Lauren met her gaze just long enough to let her know she understood the rules of this game. Then she turned and walked toward the kitchen, her spine straight. She hadn't just survived dinner with sharks. She'd learned how to swim with them. The morning after the dinner, Lauren expected the worst. She half thought she'd find an envelope with her final paycheck and a note telling her not to come back. Instead, she found Arthur in the kitchen, meticulously polishing silver spoons. "You survived," he said without looking up. Lauren poured herself a small cup of coffee, still aching from the night before. "Barely." Arthur's lips curved almost imperceptibly. "Mrs. Harrington isn't fond of being outmaneuvered. She'll try again." Lauren sipped the bitter coffee. "Then I guess I'll keep dodging." Arthur set the spoon down and met her eyes. If you're going to last here, you'll need more than quick thinking. You'll need friends. The first hint of that friend came later that morning. Lauren was dusting the grand piano in the music room when she heard the faint creak of the door. A boy of about 14 stood in the doorway, tall and lanky with dark hair that kept falling into his eyes. He wore a wrinkled t-shirt and held a skateboard under one arm. "You're the new maid," he said, more statement than question. Lauren smiled lightly. "And you must be?" "Ethan," he said. "My dad's kid." The phrasing struck her, not Mrs. Harrington's son. Just my dad's kid. He stepped into the room, glancing around like he wasn't supposed to be there. "So, how's it going?" "Last maid lasted 6 days. The one before her made it to 8. Lauren chuckled softly. "Guess I'll have to beat the record then." Ethan smirked. "If you're smart, you'll run before she eats you alive." Lauren tilted her head. "And why are you warning me?" "Because," he said, dropping his voice, "she's worse when she thinks no one's watching. And trust me, I see a lot." That afternoon, while Vanessa was out at a charity luncheon, Lauren found a folded note on her cleaning cart. In neat handwriting it read, "Library, Mrs. H's crystal vase is chipped. Don't touch it unless she's there, she'll say you broke it." No signature, but Lauren didn't need one. Ethan's warning was clear. Sure enough, when she passed through the library later, the crystal vase on the mantel had a small fracture along its base. It was the kind of trap Vanessa would set, a time bomb waiting for the next maid to discover it. Lauren kept her distance. When Vanessa returned that evening, she swept into the library, gasped dramatically, and called for Arthur. "Look at this. Another careless mistake." Arthur studied the vase, then turned to Lauren, who stood calmly nearby. "Mrs. Harrington," he said smoothly, "this damage appears to be several days old. Likely from before Ms. Johnson began her employment." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "Are you certain?" "I am," Arthur said firmly. Lauren caught the faintest glimmer in his expression, a silent "you're welcome." Over the next few days, small things began to change. Sometimes, the cleaning schedule in her room had an extra note in Arthur's handwriting. "Avoid the west wing until after 4 p.m. or use the smaller vacuum today. Mrs. H dislikes the noise." Other times, Ethan would appear in passing to drop cryptic hints. "She's in a mood today, stay away from the kitchen." Or, "Dad's home early, better make sure his office is spotless." Lauren didn't know what to call it exactly. Friendship seemed too strong for the guarded exchanges, but it was something. And in a house where every mistake could be a noose, something mattered. One evening, after dinner service, Lauren passed Ethan in the hallway. He was leaning against the wall, earbuds in, scrolling his phone. "Hey," he said without looking up, "why are you still here? Most people give up." Lauren hesitated, then said quietly, "Because I don't quit when something's hard. And because I have someone who needs me to keep going." Ethan glanced up, studying her for a moment. "Your kid." She nodded. "Malik, 7 years old. Smartest kid I know." Something flickered in Ethan's expression. Recognition, maybe even respect. "Don't tell her about him," he said. "She'll find a way to use it." It was the first real piece of advice he'd given her. That night, in her small staff quarters, Lauren thought about what Arthur had said. "You'll need friends." She still didn't know exactly where Arthur's loyalty lay, whether he was protecting her out of kindness, professionalism, or something else entirely. And Ethan? Well, he was a teenager with a stepmother he clearly didn't like. But in a mansion where the walls themselves seemed to listen, any ally was a lifeline. Vanessa might still be waiting for her to fail. But now Lauren wasn't entirely alone. And that changed everything. It started with the lilies. Lauren had been told to arrange fresh flowers for the formal living room. A tall crystal vase, perfectly balanced with white lilies and blush roses. She had measured the stems, trimmed them neatly, and placed the arrangement so the tallest lily faced the fireplace. An hour later, Vanessa stormed into the kitchen holding the vase like a weapon. "What is this?" she demanded. Lauren glanced up from wiping the counter. "The arrangement you requested, ma'am." Vanessa set the vase down with a sharp clink. "The tallest stem should face the French doors, not the fireplace. You've ruined the symmetry of the entire room." Lauren's hands tightened around the dish towel. "I can adjust it." "Oh, you'll do more than adjust it," Vanessa said, her voice laced with a sweetness that cut sharper than glass. "You'll replace every flower in the arrangement. And do it while the guests arrive this afternoon. Perhaps they'll enjoy watching the help work. Lauren's jaw tensed. She wanted to argue, to point out that no one would notice such a microscopic detail, but the image of Malik's smiling face pushed through the anger. She swallowed her reply and began again. By 3 o'clock, the Harrington mansion was filled with the soft murmur of arriving guests. Lauren was kneeling by the coffee table in the formal living room, trimming fresh stems and carefully reassembling the arrangement. Vanessa hovered nearby, chatting with 2 women in designer dresses. Every so often, she'd turn toward Lauren with a pointed comment. "Careful, Miss Johnson. Those roses bruise easily. Oh, did you just crush that petal? Make sure the water is exactly room temperature. I wouldn't want the lilies to wilt prematurely. Stand up straight when you work, dear. It's so unprofessional to hunch." The women sipped champagne and watched like it was some sort of private performance. Lauren's cheeks burned, but she kept her hands steady. The breaking point came when one of the guests, a tall woman with ice blonde hair, laughed and said, "Vanessa, you're far too hard on this one. She looks like she's trying." Vanessa smiled sweetly. "Oh, darling, I'm not hard on her. She's just different from the others. More stubborn. She seems to think she can last here." The laughter that followed wasn't cruel exactly, but it was the laughter of people who knew they were safe to mock someone who couldn't answer back. Something in Lauren snapped. She placed the last lily in the vase, stood up, and met Vanessa's gaze directly. "It's finished, ma'am?" Vanessa tilted her head, a glimmer of challenge in her eyes. "Is it? Let's see." She walked over, inspected the arrangement, then plucked a single rose from the center and held it up. "This one's the wrong shade. Replace it." Lauren didn't move. "It's the same shade as the others." A beat of silence stretched across the room. One of the guests shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa's smile didn't falter. "Are you refusing to follow instructions?" Lauren's heart pounded. She thought of every unspoken rule she'd followed, every petty correction she'd endured. She thought of Arthur's careful warnings, Ethan's whispered advice. And she thought of Malik and how losing this job would mean losing the stability she'd fought for. "I'm saying," Lauren replied evenly, "that the arrangement is perfect as it is." Gasps rippled through the room. Vanessa's eyes hardened, the warmth draining away like the last bit of sunlight before a storm. Arthur appeared in the doorway, his gaze flicking from Vanessa to Lauren. He said nothing, but his presence felt like a silent alarm bell. Vanessa set the rose down slowly, deliberately. "Arthur," she said, her voice cool and precise, "please escort Ms. Johnson to the staff quarters. I'll decide shortly whether she'll be staying with us." Lauren stood her ground. "You don't have to decide. I'm not going anywhere." Vanessa's lips curved, not in amusement but in something far more dangerous. "We'll see about that." Arthur's hand rested lightly on Lauren's elbow, guiding her toward the hallway. She could feel every pair of eyes on her back. In the corridor, away from the guests, Arthur spoke quietly. "You just declared war, Ms. Johnson." Lauren didn't slow her pace. "Then I'd better be ready to win." That night, she lay awake in her narrow bed, replaying the scene. She'd stepped over an invisible line, and she knew Vanessa wouldn't forget it. Somewhere in the mansion, a clock chimed midnight. The war had officially begun. Lauren had learned 2 things about the Harrington mansion in her first week. The walls had ears and so did she. After the flower arrangement incident, Vanessa had barely spoken to her, at least not directly. Orders came through Arthur or appeared as neat, typed lists on the kitchen counter. On the surface, it seemed like Vanessa was ignoring her. But Lauren knew better. This was the quiet before the next strike. Which was why she wasn't prepared when she accidentally walked straight into the middle of something she wasn't meant to hear. It was late evening. Most of the guests had left after an afternoon garden party, and Lauren was on cleanup duty. The West Wing was usually off-limits unless Mrs. Harrington summoned her, but Arthur had asked her to return a silver serving tray to the locked display cabinet in the study. Lauren carried the tray carefully down the carpeted hallway, her soft-soled shoes making no sound. As she approached the study, she heard voices, low, urgent. "I told you this merger can't happen without my signature," a man said. It was William Harrington, his deep voice vibrating with restrained anger. "You promised me you'd support this," Vanessa replied, her tone sharp but hushed. "This isn't about support," William snapped. "It's about the fact that I know why you married me, Vanessa. And it wasn't love." Lauren froze, her hand on the doorknob. Vanessa's laugh was short, bitter. "Careful, darling. You're not as irreplaceable as you think." "I'm not the one who needs replacing," William said. "When this blows up, you'll wish you'd listened to me." There was a pause, heavy and dangerous. Then Vanessa's voice dropped to a whisper so low Lauren almost didn't hear it. "Don't forget, your son likes me. If you make things unpleasant for me, who knows what he might hear." Lauren's breath caught. She didn't know exactly what Vanessa meant, but the threat was unmistakable. Footsteps moved toward the door. Lauren darted back, pressing herself into a shadowed alcove. The door opened and William strode out, his face carved from stone. He didn't see her. Vanessa emerged seconds later, smoothing her dress, her expression already composed. She glanced down the hallway, then turned the opposite way. Lauren slipped into the study once they were gone, setting the tray quietly on the cabinet. Her pulse was still racing. That conversation replayed in her mind the rest of the night. It wasn't just marital tension. There was business trouble, leverage, and something dark lurking under the Harringtons' glossy facade. More importantly, Vanessa had just revealed a chink in her armor. If William suspected her motives and if Ethan, the stepson, was someone she wanted to keep close, then maybe Lauren wasn't as powerless as she'd thought. But leverage was a dangerous thing. In the wrong hands, it could destroy you. And in Vanessa's world, even suspicion could be fatal to one's employment. The next morning, Ethan appeared in the kitchen while Lauren was wiping down the counters. He dropped onto a stool, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "She's in a mood," he said. Dad barely said 2 words to her at breakfast. Lauren hesitated, then decided to test the waters. "Ethan, if your dad and Vanessa ever had problems, would you want to know?" He gave her a wary look. "Why are you asking?" "No reason," she said quickly, realizing she was on thin ice. "Just curious." Ethan shrugged. "She's always got problems. But she's smart. Too smart. People underestimate her and then regret it." He hopped off the stool and grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl. "If you're thinking of going up against her, don't. You won't win." Lauren watched him go, her mind working. Maybe she wouldn't go up against Vanessa, at least not yet. But she could start collecting pieces of the puzzle. That evening, while polishing the silverware in the dining room, Lauren glanced at the reflection in the spoon she held. From where she stood, she could see the faint outline of Vanessa on the balcony, speaking on the phone. Her voice was low, but the breeze carried fragments through the open French doors. "He doesn't suspect. I'll have control before the quarter ends. If he pushes back, I'll use the boy." Lauren's grip tightened on the spoon until her knuckles whitened. She didn't know the full story yet, but she knew this. Vanessa Harrington wasn't just cruel for sport. She was playing a much bigger game, and Ethan was one of her pieces. Lauren slipped the spoon into the drawer, her reflection disappearing with it. If Vanessa was going to use the boy as a pawn, then Lauren would have to make sure she wasn't the only one moving pieces on the board. The Harringtons' Friday night dinner parties were less about food and more about spectacle. Champagne towers, imported orchids, a guest list packed with CEOs and minor celebrities, it was all Vanessa's doing. Lauren kept to the edges of the glittering chaos, moving silently between tables with a tray of champagne flutes. She had learned to avoid Vanessa's gaze. It was easier than enduring the subtle barbs disguised as compliments. By 9 o'clock, the laughter in the dining hall was loud enough to rattle the crystal. Vanessa was in her element, draped in a silk emerald gown, diamond earrings catching the chandelier light as she charmed a group of investment bankers. Lauren was about to retreat to the kitchen when she noticed something strange. Vanessa's smile faltered. Her hand trembled as she set down her champagne flute. She pressed a hand to her chest, the color draining from her face. It happened fast. One moment, Vanessa was leaning against the table, her laugh brittle but intact. The next, she was crumpling to the polished marble floor, the crowd around her erupting in startled gasps. "Call an ambulance," someone shouted. Guests stepped back, murmuring, frozen in shock. No one moved to touch her, not even William, who stood rooted, his jaw clenched in horror. Lauren's instincts kicked in before she could think. She shoved her tray into a guest's hands and knelt beside Vanessa, already checking her pulse. "Wait, ready. Vanessa, can you hear me?" Lauren asked, her voice firm. No response. She tilted Vanessa's chin, checking her airway. "Arthur, get me a blanket and call 911, now." The butler bolted. William finally dropped to his knees beside them, his voice shaking. What's happening? Lauren's hands moved automatically, assessing, stabilizing. She's in cardiac distress. We need to keep her warm and her airway clear until paramedics arrive. How do you know this? William asked wide-eyed. I'm a trained nurse, Lauren said without looking at him. She loosened Vanessa's gown at the neckline to ease her breathing. The room was silent except for Lauren's calm, clipped instructions. She began chest compressions, counting under her breath. On the third cycle, Vanessa's body convulsed and she gasped, sucking in a ragged breath. The tension in the room broke into nervous whispers. Stay with me, Lauren told her. You're not going anywhere tonight. Vanessa's eyelids fluttered open for a fraction of a second. Her gaze locked on Lauren's face, not with gratitude but with something unreadable. The paramedics burst in minutes later. Lauren rattled off Vanessa's symptoms, the timeline, and the steps she'd taken. They worked quickly, lifting her onto a stretcher. William stood there, still pale, as they wheeled Vanessa toward the door. Just before she was taken out, Vanessa's head lolled toward Lauren. Their eyes met again. No words were exchanged, but the message was clear. You saved me. Now you're part of this. The guests trickled out after that, murmuring about the drama over their half-finished wine. Arthur disappeared to lock up. The house felt unnervingly quiet when William finally approached Lauren in the kitchen. You saved her life, he said, almost as if he didn't believe it. Lauren kept wiping the counter, unwilling to make a big deal of it. It's my job to help when someone's in trouble. No, he said firmly. It's not your job. Not here. You could have stepped back and let the professionals handle it, but you didn't. Why? Lauren hesitated, then met his gaze. Because regardless of who she is, she's still a human being. And someone's mother. William exhaled slowly, his shoulders relaxing. Vanessa's not easy to deal with. But after tonight, she owes you. That's not a position many people find themselves in. Lauren's jaw tightened. She wasn't thinking about favors. She was thinking about the whispered phone call she'd overheard on the balcony, about Ethan, about Vanessa's threats. Maybe now the playing field wasn't so uneven. Later that night, long after the lights in the West Wing had gone dark, Lauren sat on the small bed in her staff quarters, staring at the folded blanket Arthur had brought her in the chaos. Saving Vanessa hadn't been a strategic move, it had been instinct. But now she couldn't ignore the truth. Vanessa's survival meant she now held something powerful. The Harringtons didn't trust easily, but they did repay debts. And debts in Beverly Hills were as valuable as diamonds, if you knew how to collect. Lauren turned off the lamp and lay back, her mind turning over the possibilities. For the first time since stepping into this house, she didn't feel like prey. Now she was a player. The Harrington estate felt strangely muted in Vanessa's absence. The usual sharp click of her heels, the echo of her voice commanding from room to room, gone. She'd been admitted to Cedars-Sinai the night of the collapse. Lauren assumed that would be the last she'd see of her until discharge day. She was wrong. 3 days later, William approached Lauren while she was polishing the silver in the dining room. Vanessa wants to see you, he said simply, as if announcing a dentist appointment. Lauren blinked. Me? She specifically asked, he said, looking faintly puzzled himself. At the hospital, Lauren was shown into a private suite with sweeping views of Los Angeles. Vanessa lay in bed, pale but still elegant in a silk robe, her hair perfectly brushed back. The diamond studs in her ears looked almost comically out of place against the foreline in her arm. Close the door, Vanessa said. Her voice was hoarse, but her eyes were sharp. Lauren obeyed, moving to stand near the foot of the bed. How are you feeling? Like I was trampled by a pack of Prada models, Vanessa replied dryly. Then after a pause, sit. I'm not in the mood to crane my neck. Lauren hesitated, then lowered herself into the chair beside the bed. You saved my life, Vanessa said bluntly. Don't bother with the false modesty, you did. The doctors told me. Lauren simply nodded. Anyone would have done the same. Don't insult my intelligence, Vanessa said, her lips curling faintly. Half that room was worth more than this hospital, and not one of them moved a muscle. You did. Why? Lauren's fingers tightened on the armrest. Because I'm trained to help. And because you're a person, whether you believe I see you that way or not. For a long moment, Vanessa said nothing. Then, to Lauren's surprise, she smiled, just a fraction but genuine. They want to do the surgery in 2 weeks, Vanessa said, shifting the conversation. A valve replacement. Risky but not as risky as waiting. William's been hovering, but I told him I wanted to speak to you alone first. Lauren frowned. Why? Because I need someone in that house I can trust while I'm gone. The words hung in the air like a challenge. You don't trust your husband? Lauren asked carefully. I trust William with money. I trust him with contracts. I do not trust him to notice when the wolves start circling. Lauren studied her. You think someone's after you? I think someone's after something, Vanessa said smoothly. And in Beverly Hills, those somethings tend to vanish the second you're on an operating table. It was strange sitting in that sterile hospital room talking like allies. 4 months, Vanessa had treated her like an unwanted stain on expensive upholstery. But now the edge in her tone was gone. I know you've overheard things, Vanessa said suddenly. Don't look so shocked, I see everything in my house. You've probably made judgments about me. Fair enough. But what you don't know is that this surgery, it's not just about me. There are people who'd rather I didn't make it. Lauren didn't flinch. That's a heavy thing to lay on someone you barely tolerate. Vanessa's gaze held hers. Which is why it means something that I'm telling you. I've had a dozen maids come and go. None of them had the spine to stand their ground. You do. Lauren exhaled slowly. What exactly are you asking me to do? Watch. Listen. Keep your eyes open while I'm in here and on that table. And if anything seems off, tell me the moment I wake up. Lauren thought of Ethan, of the paycheck she couldn't afford to lose, of the unspoken danger in Vanessa's words. And in return? Vanessa's smile was faint but cunning. In return, I make sure your son's name is on the list. Lauren's heart skipped. What list? The donor list. The one you've been calling hospitals about. For a moment the room felt too small. Lauren had never told Vanessa about Ethan's condition. She didn't have to ask how she knew. Vanessa's world was built on information. You're offering to help my son. I'm offering to make sure he gets the surgery he needs, Vanessa corrected softly. We both have something to lose, Lauren. That makes us the same for now. They sat in silence for a beat, the hum of the heart monitor filling the space between them. Finally Lauren said, All right. I'll do it. Vanessa leaned back against the pillows, a glimmer of satisfaction in her eyes. Good. Let's hope you're better at keeping watch than you are at polishing silver. Lauren almost smiled. Almost. As she left the room she felt the oddest thing, a flicker of something dangerously close to loyalty. Not trust, not friendship, but a fragile thread that could hold, at least until the surgery was over. The waiting room smelled faintly of antiseptic and overbrewed coffee. The television in the corner droned on about a celebrity divorce, but no one was watching. Lauren sat stiffly in the molded plastic chair, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles ached. Vanessa had gone into surgery an hour ago. William was somewhere down the hall, pacing like a restless panther. She told herself she was only here out of duty, that a maid's place wasn't in a billionaire's family crisis, but she stayed anyway. The double doors to the surgical wing swung open, and a man in a gray suit entered. He wasn't dressed like hospital staff, and there was nothing casual about the way he scanned the room. His gaze landed on Lauren. You're Lauren Price? His voice was smooth, practiced. Yes, she said cautiously. He extended a business card. The name read Victor Hayes, attorney at law. I represent Mrs. Harrington, he said. She wanted me to speak to you privately before the surgery, but given the circumstances, he gestured toward a side alcove away from the others. Against her better judgment, Lauren followed. I'll be blunt, Hayes said, lowering his voice. Mrs. Harrington recently updated her will. Lauren's stomach tightened. Why are you telling me this? Because your name is in it. She froze. What? He pulled out a folded document, just enough for her to glimpse her own name in black ink. In the event of her death, Mrs. Harrington has left a portion of her personal assets to you, earmarked for your son's medical care. Lauren felt the blood drain from her face. She didn't? She did, Hayes interrupted. And Mr. Harrington doesn't know. The weight of his words hit her like a punch. William didn't know. Back in the waiting room, William returned from his pacing, his eyes sharp. What was that about? Lauren opened her mouth to deflect, but Hayes' parting words echoed in her head. Be careful who you trust. Just hospital paperwork, she said quickly. William studied her for a long moment before his expression smoothed into something unreadable. Good. Keep it that way. Lauren sat again, trying to focus on the clock, but her thoughts were a tangle. Vanessa's offer had been risky enough, but leaving her something in a will? That could paint a target on her back. She was still wrestling with it when she overheard William on the phone. His voice was low, but the words carried. Yes. The moment it's confirmed she's under anesthesia. Make the transfer. No, not to her account, straight to the Cayman Trust. Lauren's stomach flipped. Transfer? Cayman Trust? She turned slightly, pretending to watch the TV, listening. Yes, everything. If she doesn't make it, I want no questions about ownership. Clear? The call ended and William glanced around. For a second their eyes met. Something in his look chilled her. It wasn't grief or worry. It was calculation. A hand touched her shoulder, making her jump. It was Nurse Daniels, Vanessa's favorite nurse from the house staff, who had come to the hospital to check in. Lauren, there's something you should know, she whispered. I saw Mr. Harrington going through Vanessa's private safe last week. The one in her dressing room. Lauren's pulse quickened. What was he looking for? Daniels shook her head. Didn't see. But afterward she was furious. She told me if anything happened to her, to tell you. Check the blue folder. A blue folder. In a billionaire's mansion that could mean anything, or everything. Hours passed in a haze of bad coffee and tense silence. Finally, Dr. Myers emerged from the surgical wing, his scrubs dotted with faint stains. She's stable, he announced. The valve replacement was successful. She's in recovery, but the next 24 hours are critical. Relief swept through the room, but in William's eyes, Lauren thought she saw something else. A flicker of disappointment before it vanished. Later, as William stepped away to take another call, Hayes reappeared at Lauren's side. You should know, he murmured. If Mrs. Harrington survives and the will remains, certain parties won't be pleased. And if she doesn't survive, he stopped, letting the implication hang. Lauren's skin prickled. Are you saying I'm in danger? I'm saying you're in the middle of something much bigger than a paycheck. That night, lying awake in the mansion's small guest quarters, Lauren replayed every moment in the waiting room. The secret in Vanessa's will. William's mysterious call. The blue folder. Whatever this truce with Vanessa was, it wasn't just about trust anymore. It was about survival. The sterile white of the ICU felt colder than any winter Lauren had ever known. The rhythmic beeping of monitors was the only sign that Vanessa Harrington was still tethered to life. It had been 2 days since the surgery. 2 days of hovering on the thin line between survival and loss. Lauren stood at the glass wall, watching the billionaire's new wife lie motionless, her face pale, her chest rising and falling with mechanical regularity. She wasn't supposed to feel this way, not after the insults, the power games, the impossible demands. But now Vanessa's absence seemed to press against the entire house, the entire family. Day one after surgery had been chaos. William had tried to carry on with controlled confidence, speaking in firm tones to doctors, but Lauren had caught him alone, jaw tight, muttering into his phone again. Move it all now. She won't know if she wakes up, or if she doesn't. She didn't ask what it was. She didn't need to. Day two brought whispers. The Harrington estate staff were already speculating about what would happen if Vanessa didn't make it. Some feared job cuts. Others quietly hoped for looser rules. But for Lauren, this wasn't about job security anymore. It was about what Vanessa had said before surgery, her hand weak but her eyes blazing. If anything happens to me, promise me you'll protect the boy. And check the blue folder. The words looped in Lauren's mind like a warning. That morning, Lauren found herself summoned to the hospital earlier than usual. William wasn't there when she arrived, only a single nurse tending to Vanessa. She's responding, the nurse said, adjusting a drip. Not much yet, but we saw her fingers twitch. Lauren stepped closer, the faintest flicker of hope igniting. Vanessa's face looked different up close, not hard and regal but tired, human. Lauren reached out, hesitating before resting her fingers lightly on Vanessa's arm. You're stronger than they think, she murmured. Don't let them write you off. The door to the room opened, and William entered, dressed impeccably as always despite the hour. His eyes darted from Vanessa to Lauren. You're here early, he said as if it were a challenge. I wanted to check on her, Lauren replied evenly. He studied her for a long moment before turning his attention to the nurse. Has she been conscious? Not fully, sir. Just reflexes. William's jaw tightened. Let me know the moment she wakes. By afternoon, the family's private physician arrived, carrying a leather-bound case. Lauren had seen him once before at a Harrington gala. He examined Vanessa in silence, then drew William aside. Lauren couldn't hear what they said, but William's stiff nod and the way his lips pressed into a line told her it wasn't good. After the doctor left, William sat heavily in the chair beside the bed, leaning close to his wife. If you pull through, he whispered, too low for the nurse but just loud enough for Lauren to catch, we'll have to talk about your mistakes. Mistakes. The word felt loaded, dangerous. That night, just before visiting hours ended, Lauren returned for one last check. The hallway outside Vanessa's room was quiet, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. When she stepped inside, she froze. Vanessa's eyes were open, only slightly but enough to meet hers. Lauren moved closer, pulse racing. You're awake, she whispered. Vanessa's lips moved but no sound came. Lauren bent down until she could feel the faint warmth of Vanessa's breath. Folder, blue. Lauren nodded quickly. I'll find it. I promise. Vanessa's fingers twitched weakly around Lauren's hand before slipping back into stillness. The next morning, everything changed. Doctors declared Vanessa's condition cautiously optimistic. William put on a show of relief for the hospital staff, but Lauren saw the way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. The surgery had saved Vanessa's life, but it had also saved her secrets. And that meant the game was far from over. Because now Lauren wasn't just a maid. She was the keeper of a promise. And someone, maybe William, would do anything to make sure she never kept it. The Harrington mansion had never felt so divided. Vanessa was home from the hospital, recovering in the East Wing, the air thick with the scent of fresh lilies and tension. William's instructions to the staff were curt, almost militaristic. No unnecessary chatter. No visitors without clearance. Lauren moved quietly through the halls, aware that every step was being watched. The housekeeper, Dolores, avoided eye contact now. The chauffeur no longer offered his usual warm nod. Even the gardener seemed to pause his work when she passed, as if weighing something in his mind. She knew why. The rumors had spread. Everyone knew she had been at Vanessa's side during the surgery. Everyone had heard about the whispered promises and the blue folder that William had suddenly taken a keen interest in. On the third day after Vanessa's return, a formal summons arrived. Not a note. Not a polite request. A folded sheet of cream paper, delivered on a silver tray by Dolores, bearing William's neat, angular handwriting. Lauren. East Wing Library. 8 p.m. sharp. Lauren spent the rest of the day in a restless fog, replaying every interaction with both William and Vanessa, wondering which version of herself they would choose to see tonight, the loyal helper or the meddler who had crossed invisible lines. At precisely 8 she entered the library. The room glowed with warm amber light from the chandelier, but the mood was cold. William stood by the fireplace, his suit flawless, one hand resting on the mantel. Vanessa sat in a high-backed chair, still pale from her ordeal, but her eyes were alert and sharper than Lauren had ever seen them. You wanted to see me? Lauren asked, her voice steady despite the thundering in her chest. Vanessa gestured for her to sit. Lauren, we have a decision to make. William didn't sit. He circled slowly, his movements deliberate, like a predator measuring distance. You've been in this house longer than any maid since Vanessa and I married. That's unusual. Lauren kept her gaze level. I do my job. You do more than your job, William said. You insert yourself into matters that don't concern you. Vanessa's lips curved slightly, though it wasn't quite a smile. And yet, if not for you, I might not be here. The silence between them stretched, heavy with unspoken history. Lauren broke it first. You asked me to protect your son. You trusted me with something important. That's not something I take lightly. William's expression hardened. And did you also take lightly the fact that you've been prying into my affairs? I haven't been prying, Lauren shot back, surprising herself with the sharpness of her tone. I've been protecting. Even when it meant standing up to you. Vanessa's eyes flicked between them, and for the first time, Lauren saw something in her. Something vulnerable, almost grateful. Vanessa spoke softly, but the words landed like stones in the quiet room. "William, if we punish her, we tell everyone in this house, and in this family, that loyalty is worthless." William's jaw tightened. "And if we keep her, we reward defiance." Vanessa's gaze shifted back to Lauren. "What do you want, Lauren? If you could walk away today, no debt, no danger, would you?" Lauren took a breath, her mind flashing through the months of tension, the insults, the long nights. And then Tyler's laugh. The way he had hugged her after Vanessa's surgery. The boy who had looked at her as if she wasn't just staff, but someone he could trust. "I'd stay," she said finally. "Not for the money. Not for you. For him. Because promises matter." The words seemed to hang in the air, impossible to ignore. Vanessa leaned back, her expression unreadable. "Then I think we have our answer." William turned sharply to her. "Vanessa." She held up a hand. "You may not like her, William, but I owe my life to this woman. And our son trusts her." William stared at Lauren for a long moment, then let out a slow, reluctant breath. "Fine. You stay. But understand this, loyalty goes both ways. Cross me again, and no one will be able to protect you." Lauren didn't flinch. Understood. When she left the library that night, her position was secure, but not safe. She had chosen to stay in a house that could turn on her at any moment. A house where redemption was fragile, and betrayal was always just one whisper away. But for now she had one. And sometimes, survival was the most powerful revenge of all. The Harrington mansion was quiet in a way it hadn't been in months. Not the tense, watchful quiet of suspicion, but something gentler, like a deep breath finally released. Lauren moved through the marble-floored hallways with the same careful efficiency as always, but now heads didn't turn when she passed. Dolores had gone back to greeting her in the mornings with a warm, "Coffee's fresh, honey." The gardener had returned to tipping his cap. Even the chauffeur had started offering his sly, knowing grin again. For the first time since she'd stepped foot inside, Lauren realized, this house had stopped treating her like an intruder. Vanessa was in the sunroom, surrounded by late-blooming orchids, when Lauren arrived with her tea. She was stronger now, color returning to her cheeks, the shadows under her eyes less harsh. "You didn't have to bring this yourself," Vanessa said, accepting the delicate porcelain cup. "I wanted to," Lauren replied. "It's good to see you up." Vanessa sipped her tea, then fixed Lauren with a look that was somewhere between gratitude and curiosity. "You know, you've lasted longer than all the others. A miracle, really." Lauren smiled faintly. "Maybe I don't scare as easily. Or maybe," Vanessa said, her tone softening, "you have more patience than most. I can't imagine why you'd want to stay after everything." Lauren thought of Tyler, of the promises she'd made to herself, and of the countless women who had walked out of this house defeated. "Because I wanted to see it through. To know I didn't quit when it got hard." Later that afternoon, Lauren found Tyler in the music room, hunched over the grand piano. His fingers were still clumsy, but the melody he coaxed out was sweet and hopeful. "Sounds good," she said from the doorway. He grinned. "Mom says I can have lessons again. I'm gonna get really good. You'll see." Lauren stepped closer, resting a hand on the polished wood. "I believe you." 4 months, this boy had been her anchor, her reason to ignore the whispers, endure the glares, and keep showing up. And now, for the first time, she could see a future here that didn't feel like a fight. That evening, William returned from a business trip. Lauren was in the foyer when he walked in, suitcase in hand, his gaze sweeping over her in that cool, assessing way of his. "You're still here?" he said. She met his eyes. "I am. Possible." Then, to her surprise, the faintest hint of a smile touched his lips. "Good." No apology. No warm welcome. But for William Harrington, that single word was as close to acceptance as she was likely to get. Weeks passed. The rhythms of the house shifted. Where once there had been constant turnover, there was now consistency. Lauren learned the small, unspoken preferences that made life smoother. How Vanessa liked her linens pressed, the exact way Tyler preferred his grilled cheese, the subtle signs that William's mood was about to sour. She stopped thinking of herself as a visitor in the mansion and started thinking of herself as part of it, an invisible pillar holding it together. One afternoon, Vanessa caught her in the hallway. "We're having a dinner party this weekend," she said. "The first since," she hesitated, then waved the thought away. "Since before the surgery. I'd like you to stay on that evening, not just to work but to be here." As part of the family. Lauren blinked, unsure she'd heard right. You mean? Yes, Vanessa said simply. Not staff. Not for the night. Just here. It was a small gesture, but it felt like the breaking of a long, silent barrier. The dinner party came and went. Lauren stayed mostly in the background, but Vanessa introduced her to a few guests as the one who keeps this house running. William didn't contradict her. Tyler bragged to anyone who would listen that Lauren made the best pancakes in Beverly Hills. For the first time, Lauren didn't feel like she was surviving in the mansion. She was living in it. On a quiet Sunday morning, Lauren stood in the grand entryway, sunlight spilling through the tall windows. She thought of the day she first arrived, nervous, guarded, certain she wouldn't last. Now she was still here. The Harringtons had seen her at her best and her worst. They had tested her loyalty, doubted her motives, and pushed her to the edge. And yet, she had stayed, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she had made something here worth holding on to. As she climbed the staircase, Tyler's laughter echoed from somewhere down the hall. Vanessa's voice followed, warm and unhurried. For the first time in the mansion's long, dramatic history, a maid had lasted. And in doing so, Lauren had changed the house. Not just its staff roster, but its heart. If this story touched your heart, remember, sometimes the smallest steps lead to the biggest changes. Subscribe and join us for more stories that prove compassion can change the world.